Welcome. I am so excited to have you here at my first ever course. This is the first course I am launching amongst a series and so many more to come. My name is Justin and I am from Justin Tech. And this course is really for all the aspiring IT professionals, all the aspiring security professionals. That also includes if you're in the field too and you're learning and growing and want to do more, want to learn more, this course is for you. So the basis of this course will be outlined very similar to the CompTIA Security Plus 701 certification. And I'll be following that same objective line by line to cover the different things that are in that exam. So with that being said, today we'll explore the critical topics of cybersecurity controls and categories to safeguard our digital and physical assets. This is important. This is important for a number of reasons, especially in the day and age that we're living in right now. It's important to guard your digital assets. It's important to guard your physical assets. And this means physically within a company, digitally within a company, and even your own personal. This is good for the day-to-day living as well, just to understand these concepts. Understand these different things that I'll talk about in this course. You'll hear words such as managerial, you'll hear operational, you'll even hear deterrent, you'll hear preventative, and you'll hear amongst the other terms that I'll go ahead and define in this course. So let's go over our table of contents. As we talked about in our previous slide, we'll be talking about categories and control types. We have different categories that I mentioned earlier: technical, managerial, operational, physical. Then there will also be some control type that we'll go over. We'll go over preventive, deterrent, detective, corrective, compensating. These are all key ingredients to a strong security posture in an organization and even in your own. This is good for day-to-day practice. Keep in mind with these categories and control types, they can be placed into one another. A preventative can be placed in the technical category. A deterrent can be placed in the managerial. Detective can be placed in operational. Each control type can fit in these categories. It's just a matter of what is the example that applies to that. And in this course, we'll go over those things. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get to the nitty gritty. So building off of our previous slide, overviewing our security categories and diving into a little bit of our control types. You see here we have managerial. When you think of managerial, think of policies, think of procedures. You have operational. When you have this, think of people. The next one we have is technical. When you think of technical, think of extremely technological, such as endpoint securities. You have encryptions, that's data at rest, data in motion. You have access controls, firewalls. We have physical, and this is self-explanatory because it's physical. It's things you can see, things that you can touch, things that you feel, such as guards, locks, fences, traps. You have CCTV cameras, different things of that nature fall into that physical control. So these are our 4 security categories that we're going to dive into deeper. So let's start with our managerial function here. So again, keep in mind that managerial controls is simply the aspect of policies and procedures and building a security posture in your organization. You want to have a security policy that establishes and enforces an organization-wide policy that defines security requirements, standards, and also your guidelines. This is highly important to have policies. You need something to govern your business. And with that, we also need to go a little bit deeper. We need to have a security design and implementation. We need to have policies, but we also need to design it and we need to implement it as well. So we need to conduct some risk assessments to identify and mitigate potential security vulnerabilities. You want to ensure the implementation of appropriate safeguards and controls are in place. You want to do a gap analysis. You want to know what your organization has and what it wants to build towards, and you can design and then implement those things. Thirdly, you have standard operating procedures. And then lastly, you also have ticketing systems. And I go through these slides, feel free to pause at any time to read the slides, to take notes, to jot down different ideas that you may have. But let's keep it moving. Our next category is going to be our operational controls. And as I mentioned, this one is really more so people oriented. So this is operations that you require people. There's no technical aspect, although it might be incorporated, but it's initiated by someone who is a human, who is a person. So you need security awareness programs. This involves you and I, organizations, stakeholders, different people to join a program to learn and be aware of security threats that might jeopardize the company, that might present or steal sensitive information. Employees should know how to be aware of these things and avoid them as well. What should you do when you get a suspicious email, when you have that phishing email that comes into your work email? You have to notify the correct individuals on your team in your organization, and that is placed within security awareness programs. You also have tabletop exercises. This is really more so for our security individuals and our IT individuals. Really what a tabletop exercise is essentially just a simulated real-world event, allowing teams to practice their incident response procedures and improve preparedness for potential cybersecurity threats. You can even think of fire drills as a tabletop exercise. You're practicing when a fire happens, the alarm goes off, and you have the exit routes that your organization may go through. It's very similar to that. And in this case, tabletop exercises can involve vulnerability attacks. What should a cybersecurity professional do in the event that we're attacked with vulnerabilities? We're attacked with viruses. There's different malwares that are infecting our organization. What should we do? And those is what tabletop exercises trains us to do so that we can better secure our company posture. Another example of operational controls would be security guards. Very physical, you need security to man appropriately, to guard, to monitor, to deter unauthorized access, you hear that I mentioned, and respond to security incidents to safeguard people, property, and also sensitive information. So that is operational controls in a nutshell. So let's keep moving. Now, let's get into the technical controls. So these are some of the technologies that help us detect, deter, prevent, compensate. I'm missing one of them, but you tell me what that one is and write that in the comment. Different examples of a technical control include endpoint protection, antivirus software encryption, access control, firewalls, and intrusion prevention and detection systems. Technical controls do it all. They have the technology that handles protecting our software on a day-to-day. Devices like laptops and desktops that detect and prevent and respond to security threats. We in our organizations should have antivirus software that scans and detects known viruses, worms, and other malicious code, removing and even quarantining them from the system. We also have encryption that converts information into a coded format, ensuring that confidentiality and integrity of data during storage or transmission is there. You have other things such as access control mechanisms and firewall monitoring. And then lastly, our intrusion prevention and detection systems. IPS and IDS, you'll hear these terms later on in the course, so stay tuned for more. So let's move right along into our next topic, which is going to be physical controls. The basis of this one is simply the protection of the organization facilities and assets. Think physical, think what can you see, what can you feel, what can you touch, what's there that's physically protecting an organization. You might have locking keys. You might have a badge reader where employees are required to badge into a building. That's a physical control. You might have fences and barriers that are protecting that organization from any intruders. You may have man traps that secure entry points with 2 sets of doors that can only be opened at one time by preventing unauthorized access. You might have CCTV surveillance cameras that are tracking and monitoring what's going around the organization, what's going around even inside the organization. And then lastly, another example would be guard shacks. You might have these stations that host the guards that can also deter. Sometimes when you're walking up to different federal buildings, you might see a guard shack. And honestly, sometimes that deters threats, different activities from proceeding to the building. Let's dive in a little bit deeper into our control types. I mentioned some earlier at the beginning of this presentation, if you remember them. They're deterrent. I mentioned preventative as well. And so those control types are the following. You have deterrent controls, you have preventative controls, you have detective controls, corrective, and also compensating. So when it comes to these control types, Remember what I said earlier, how each control type can fit in all of those categories. You have your deterrents that can fit inside technical, managerial, operational, and also physical. So with that being said, let's get down to the nitty gritty and let's talk about some of these control types here. So the first control type we have is going to be deterrent controls. And deterrent is exactly what that means. It deters and discourages people from engaging in undesirable behavior, such as accessing a network or entering a restricted area. Deterrent controls are set to stop people or deter people from coming in of their own free will. They might see an alarm system. They might see some signage. They might see a front desk reception. They might see an application splash screen. And these things just deter them from actually going into those systems and doing any undesirable behavior, such as hacking. The second control that we'll transition to serves as the first line of defense against cyber threats. This control can include guards, station personnel to monitor and control the access of a building. You have your fencing, your barriers to restrict movement. You have your locks, you have your access control systems. Preventative control really works right in tandem with the deterrent controls discussed earlier, really to create a comprehensive security approach. So you might see some of those things used in the preventative as well as being deterrent tools too. Next, let's go ahead and explore the detective controls, which is the next layer of security, building upon those preventative controls discussed in that previous slide. Your detective controls are designed to identify and alert security personnel to potential security breaches or incidents. These controls will monitor and detect unauthorized access, serving as an early warning sign. Sometimes you might see this as fire alarms. You might even see this as motion detectors, system logs. So the goal of the detective control is really to provide visibility into potential security issues that enable a quick response. So as you know, motion detectors, you're notified of that. Once you have that motion detector that goes off, you can quickly respond to that as you so please. So now we'll move on to corrective and recovery controls, which are implemented after a security incident has occurred to reverse the impact and restore normal operations. These controls include different things such as backup recovery, restoring a system and data from backups. You might have experienced a complete data wipeout that has affected your organization completely. So the way, how can you get that stuff back? You should have a backup recovery system, whether that's on premise, whether that's on the cloud. You should have a place where you can easily back up and recover all that information that you may have lost due to an outage, a hack, a natural disaster, you name it. Backup recoveries are so vital in our day and age that it's necessary to recover business operations as quickly as possible. Another example might be even runbooks for reporting security issues. So you might have things that's documented for responding to resolving security incidents. These are corrective controls, steps and processes that allows you to get back to your normal operations. And a fun one I always like to include is even using sprinkler systems or fire extinguishers. Those are even considered corrective and recovery controls because they might correct something that's being damaged. There's a fire that's happening. You will put it out using a fire extinguisher or a sprinkler. Think in that manner. When it comes to corrective controls, an incident has already happened. How can we fix this to allow us to go back to our normal operation? So now let's move on to our compensating controls, which is essentially just an alternative measure that is implemented when a preferred control is not feasible or cost effective anymore. For example, an organization may not have the funds necessary to hire guards that are on staff every day. So in place of that, they might opt for security badges, for badge readers, or swiping cards in order to enter a facility, opposed to spending that extra fundage on actually getting a security guard or getting patrol officers to man physical facility. Another example would be in our day-to-day age is power outages. We experience a lot of that where I'm from. And a generator is very, very helpful to get you back to normal operations. So when it comes to compensating controls, think of things that are related to being feasible, cost effective. And that right there was all of our control types. So I mentioned earlier in our presentation that how each category you'll see here on the left-hand side, managerial, operation, technical, and physical. These different categories all are aligned with control types. For example, a physical deterrent would be signage, something that can deter somebody from doing something with repercussions that's mentioned on the signage. Physical preventive could be fences, gates, locks that's preventing you from getting inside of the building. Operational detective could be patrol officers. There's somebody there that can actually provide information, monitor the situation, log who's gone in and out of a facility. You might even have corrective when it comes to managerial. You might be implementing a business continuity plan, implementing an incident response plan. And then compensating, you might have something in the technical aspect where it's talking about firewalls. So just know that when it comes to categories and control types, they play a very key role within each other. All of the control types fit inside of the categories, and all of the categories have all the control types in them. And just to reiterate what we went over in this presentation, we went over categories that included technical, managerial, operational, and physical. We talked about control types, preventative, deterrent, detective, corrective, and compensating. And that right there ends our first course on securing the cyber frontier, comparing cybersecurity controls and categories. Thank you for watching, and watch the next.